More so because Prof Ajay Shukla me with the support of Professor Satyam Party, who is my close friend. We worked together in Sana University in 2005. So it's a real honor for me to be here remotely with you all today at the valedictory session of this conference. My presentation is titled Gendered Narratives, Endangered Identity and Environmental Sustainability, Echoes of an Apocalyptic Eco-critical Perspective on South Asian Contemporary Literature. In this talk, I'll walk you through how contemporary South Asian literature captures the essence of environmental crisis, particularly through gendered narratives and endangered identities. I also take the help of ECO's framework, which helps dissect the environmental, social, and literary intersections in this context. As many of you know, South Asia faces some of the world's most critical environmental challenges, from the melting glaciers of the Himalayas to severe air pollution in cities like that do not occur in a vacuum. They are deeply intertwined with social inequalities affecting marginal communities such as women, lower caste groups, and indigenous populations. Contemporary South Asian literature often frames these crises through an apocalyptic lens, warning of the future if action is not taken. Apocalyptic eco-criticism, very well known by all of you, as explored by scholars like Mick Smith, provides a way to interpret these literary narratives as reflective of real-world ecological concerns. Throughout this presentation, I will be using ECO's mnemonic to guide us through 6 key themes: environmental degradation, connections between social and environmental issues, historical activism, oppression and identity, ecofeminism and eco-criticism, and sustainability. I teach a course on environment and sustainability over here at Ohio University. So that becomes my responsibility to talk about the way writings are done in the field of environmental sustainability. But that may be part of discussion later on. Now, let me introduce the ECO's framework that I'm going to be coming back to again and again. E stands for environmental degradation. C stands for connections between social oppression and environmental crises. Environmental degradation has been adapted in much of South Asian literature. H stands for historical context of environmental activism, movements that shape contemporary environmental narratives for that matter. O focuses on oppression and identity, highlighting the impact of marginalized communities. The second E in this ECO's framework stands for ecofeminism and eco-criticism. Theoretical approaches, these are theoretical approaches basically. They link gender and environmental exploitation as such. And finally, S is for sustainability and calls to action, some advocacy for that matter. That happens often when we talk about sustainability. I know that most of you must have gone through the concurrent sessions in the past 2 days that Prof Ajay Shukla and his team has organized and done so well. And I was told just last night before I went to bed by Prof Ajay Shukla that things went quite well. So I believe all of you must have had a good dose of all these things already. So it might sound repetitive, might sound at times redundant as well. But I'm the chief guest as I was told, so you have to bear with me until I finish. The ECO's mnemonic is credited to Dr. Herbert Malmenti. He is an American physician. He introduced this acronym in 1978 to help medical students recall the sequential organ failure system. This was known as SOFA score. This was a scoring system used to assess the severity of organ dysfunction in critically ill patients. So this, at that time, in 1978, used to stand for cardiovascular, hematological, oxygenation, endocrine, systemic kind of stuff that they used in order to. But ever since then, this particular mnemonic has been very commonly used by and adapted in different contexts. So let's begin with the first E, environmental degradation in South Asia. To begin with, environmental degradation is, as I said, a major theme in South Asian literature. I would get the example of Amitabh Ghosh's Dun Island, for that matter. It's a prime example where the protagonist theme experiences the effects of rising sea levels and forced migration. This narrative, if we look into it very clearly, reflects the severity of climate change. The novel echoes the tenets of ecology, emphasizing the intrinsic value of nature beyond human utility. In these depictions, we are reminded that environmental crises are global, interconnected, and affect all life on Earth. What about local environments? Are you aware that something is happening in your corner of the world, in your city? Are you experiencing the change in the climate, and how does it impact? How do you feel the flash floods affecting some parts of your community, for that matter? You see similar global impacts. So some of those things are basically being used in literature, and literature is very clearly, especially the South Asian literature, is depicting those crises in ways more than one. Here is a quote from that book, if you try to say, the floods were reminded that the world was no longer the place it used to be. So those we need to be seeing and touching upon in terms of connecting to our larger goal of researching the field. And at the end of this slide, I'll be leaving you with three research questions which you can think of exploring in your research work, which could lead to PhD or a research paper, for that matter. It depends on how you're trying to look at it. So let me go to the next one, the connections between social and environmental issues. So when we look at the connections between the social inequalities and environmental degradation, I'm reminded of Indra Sinha's Animal Speak, which brings the connection to life through the story of Animal, a victim of corporate negligence following the Bhopal disaster. The novel portrays how marginalized communities bear the brunt of environmental crises. Robert Bullard's environmental justice theory of relevancy, if we try to posit it in terms of theoretical background, which Bullard highlights how the most vulnerable populations face the greatest environmental risks. Do you think that these connections resonate in your own area of study? Basically, this Robert Bullard's environmental justice theory is a framework that emphasizes the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on low-income communities and communities of color. He argues that marginalized groups bear a higher burden of exposure to pollution, toxic waste, and environmental degradation due to systemic racism and social inequality. Bullard's work also highlights the need for policies and actions that prioritize the health, well-being, and environmental justice of all communities that matter, particularly those historically excluded from decision-making processes. His study has had a significant impact on the environmental justice movement and environmental policy making. And it is in that context that we can try and establish the connections between the social and environmental issues which are reflected by people who are writing in the region. When we come to the historical context of environmental activism, South Asia has a long history of grassroots environmental activism, often led by women. Movements like Chipko movement and the Narmada Bachao Andolan, for that matter. They have significantly influenced both the real-world activism and literary narratives. In Arundhati Roy's The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, for that matter, the cemetery where Anjum, or transgender, or Lydia as you call it, lives becomes a symbol of environmental and social resistance. So we do see the role of literature in continuing the legacy of environmental resistance. These spaces of neglect mirror the struggles of marginalized communities against both environmental degradation and social exclusion. How do these historical movements reflect in the narratives you study? These are questions that you can ask yourself, and probably the conference that has been organized must have answered, or maybe you still be thinking of answering these questions later on, post-deliberation as such. When we come down to the operation and identity in literary narratives in the South Asian literature, we need to be aware that literature often portrays environmental crises as deeply linked to social oppression. If we go into the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, it reflects this as the character Anjum's marginalized identity is tied to the physical environment of the cemetery. Queer equality, the theoretical approach by Sandilands and Erickson, if we try to look at it in terms of the theoretical background, further explores how non-normative identities intersect with environmental degradation. How do gender, caste, or other marginalized identities shape the environmental narratives you encounter? Not only in literature, but also in day-to-day lives, if you try to look at it much more closely. We come down to the ecofeminism and eco-criticism, and I'm rushing through it as I know I have got limited time, and you are almost trying to finish it off as soon as possible. I believe all of you are able to hear me well. Is there any problem in can I hear a word from somebody who can say that everything is going on well at your end?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can take a few more minutes.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, good.
Yes, sir. We may take a few more minutes.
Well, when it comes to it is crucial in understanding the intersection of gender and environmental exploitation. We are reminded of Mama Kende here. She exemplifies, especially this novel, Nectar Nassif, she exemplifies how women, particularly in rural South Asia, are disproportionately affected by environmental crises. The protagonist, Rukmini for that matter, if you try to look into that novel, struggles with the land, infertility due to industrialization, reflecting how patriarchy and capitalism exploit both women and nature. How do ecofeminist themes emerge in the literature that you are studying? All these questions need to be answered. And eventually we will come down to the sustainability and calls to action, the advocacy part, which is where the apocalyptic literature often serves as a call to action. In the lowland, Jhumpa Lahiri, for that matter, uses the destruction of wetlands as a metaphor for broader areas to rethink sustainability. Smith's apocalyptic eco-criticism emphasizes that these narratives are not just warnings, they are calls for real-world change. Can these narratives, these apocalyptic narratives, inspire concrete sustainability efforts in your own regions? These are matters for us to discuss, and I understand that it must have been discussed during the conference. I'm skipping a few slides that I have prepared, but I'll go straight away to the depicted as first to suffer from environmental, but also as leaders of resistance. If we try to look at area of silence environmentalism, which emphasizes how women's role in nurturing the environment offer valuable insights into sustainability. And I would believe that you obviously see how South Asian literature helps amplify those voices to advocate for more inclusive approaches to ecological justice. How do engendered or gendered narratives shape environmental justice in your own work, for that matter, that needs to be contemplated? So, if you look at the conclusion, we have got, we have basically tried to touch upon the degradation and related narratives have been interwoven. The American literary critic Lawrence Boyle reminds us that literature is not just a reflection of the world, it's a tool for shaping the vision for change. And here are to ponder over and think of working on maybe in the next few years. One is where we want you to focus on how eco-feminist narratives in South Asian apocalyptic literature influence gender inclusive environmental policies in the next 5 years. I mean, it is specific in terms of focus on ecofeminism in South Asian literature. You can measure it in terms of analyzing the policy changes over a 5-year period. You can achieve the analysis through qualitative and policy analysis for that matter, and it is relevant today in the context of its alignment with global gender and environmental goals. I would suggest that some of you get inspired with this conference, and that will be the best outcome for this university, this conference organizers, and that will bring justice to this conference itself. And I believe the other questions accordingly will be also looked at, like what measurable impact do literary representations of climate-induced migration in South Asian novels have on shaping public discourse about climate refugees by 2030. We are told that that there will be some impact of climate change, some major impact of climate change by 2030. These dates keep on shifting as we approach those dates, but then the changes are real. And we know some of the places which are going down the sea, and things can become really worse if we are not able to take some actions as such. Finally, the third question that I want you to look at is the integration of apocalyptic eco-criticism in South Asian literature, and how can it improve sustainable practices in urban planning and development by 2027 for that matter. Do you see that the governments in place, they are paying attention to anything of that sort? And I know that there is somebody from the government in today's valedictory session, they might even touch upon some of these ideas. Thank you so much. I can open the floor for questions, but for that you will have to let me, somebody will have to speak a little bit loud to me. Thank you so much.
And I would request the convener of the conference to bring our guest of honor and both guest of honor on the dais, please. And in the meanwhile, our chairperson of the session will be joining us too. He has another meeting that he will join us very soon. So. Now I would invite a few questions from the participants on Professor Sinha's talk.
Professor Sinha had just concluded his lecture, and since he had his class at 7 o'clock there at the university, so I think he will not be able to be here throughout the session. And as he had just said that if you want to ask any question, you may ask the question, or test mic will be given to you. Any questions from audience? I think, sir, your lecture was quite clear, and the participants and the students understood it very well. And especially, we were sitting there, and I was also enjoying you. Sir, am I audible to you?
Very little. I'm not able to hear you very clearly. So I understand.
Sir, am I audible to you now?
Yeah, I'm audible. Yeah.
Okay,
You
fine.
I can hear you now better.
So we were sitting, sir, off the dais and enjoying your lecture. Since I have been assigned the task of vote of thanks also, and maybe by that time you will not be able in the session because you will be in your class. Especially for me, I mean, as a convener, I express my sincere thanks to you, sir. And the style actually which you adopted fascinated me a lot. I am also very fond of using acronyms, and you began your lecture with acronym, and your entire lecture was based on echoes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a kind of, echo which is there in the seminar, and you started very well explaining, elaborating the word echoes like environmental degradation, then connection and social endeavors, then historical activism, then oppression and identity, then eco-criticism, and then sustainability and cause for action. So that I think covered each and every aspect of the conference, the topic of the conference which you selected. In passing, I think you have also mentioned SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 13, which calls for climate action. So thank you very much, sir. It was quite enlightening session. Now over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day, sir. And now, next in line, I would like to invite our next guest of honor to give his address. This is Dr. Chandrabhushan Tripathi, sir.
Dr. Chandrabhushan Tripathi ji is a scholar of Sanskrit. So I thought that at least there should be one resource person who could be from the literature, and he has been additional district magistrate here in Jaipur, and he was also district magistrate of Hamirpur, and at present he is the special secretary in the Department of Environment. So that is why I made a request to him to join us and share his thoughts.
भूमे मातर्निधेहि भद्रया सुप्रतिष्ठितं संविधानादिवाकवे श्रियां माधेहि बुद्ध्याम्. O Mother Earth, keep me well established in your auspiciousness, O knowledgeable one, who is in harmony with life, keep me in abundance. Honorable Chief Guest, Professor Ajay Shukla sir, honorable guests on the dais, Dr. Shantanu Tripathi ji, Professor Shantanu Tripathi ji, Professor Siddharth Tripathi ji, and Professor Arun Kumar sir, and respected Prof Ajay Shukla. Actually, my topic is related to Sanskrit literature and basically Vedic literature. And with permission of the dais, I would like to talk in Hindi and Sanskrit because description and detailing of Vedic mantras are some hard to do. सबसे पहले तो मैं प्रोफेसर अजय शुक्ला जी को बहुत बहुत बधाई दूंगा. आप सबको भी बधाई दूंगा विश्वविद्यालय 75 साल का हो गया, और इस अवसर पर जो आयोजन किया गया है उसके लिए प्रोफेसर साहब को, उनकी पूरी टीम को, विश्वविद्यालय को, रजिस्ट्रार साहब को, डीन साहब को, सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद और बधाई. विशेष करके इस बात के लिए कि आपने विषय इन्वायरमेंट से चुना है, और मुझे भी इसलिए बुलाया है कि मैं इन्वायरमेंट, क्लाइमेट चेंज और फॉरेस्ट का काम लेता हूँ. और मैं बहुत आदर के साथ प्रोफेसर योगेश सिन्हा साहब को भी कहना चाहूँगा कि उन्होंने रिक्वेस्ट दिया कि कोई गवर्नमेंट से आया है. आज का जो विषय है मुख्य रूप से तो हम लोग साउथ एशियन लिटरेचर की बात कर रहे हैं. साउथ एशियन लिटरेचर में अगर संस्कृत लिटरेचर की बात न की जाए तो शायद बहुत कुछ अधूरा रह जाएगा. इको क्रिटिसिज्म, जहाँ आप सब लोग जानते होंगे कि इट इज रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ नेचर इन लिटरेचर, ह्यूमन एंड नेचर रिलेशनशिप, environmental justice, climate change and literature, biodiversity and conservation. इसको संक्षेप में कहें तो it investigates the relation between human and natural world environmental issue. अब जब हम रिलेशन की बात करते हैं तो उसके साथ हमारे और सारे इश्यूज आ जाते हैं. कल्चरल इश्यूज हैं उसमें, इंडिविजुअल्स बिहेवियर इन रिलेशन टू नेचर है, इन्वायरमेंटल लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म. मैं समझता हूँ विषय पे काफ़ी चर्चा हो चुकी है कल से और आज है. अभी हमने प्रोफेसर योगेश सिन्हा सर को भी सुना, उन्होंने बड़ा डिटेल में सब बताया. जो आज का ये विषय है और ये जो चिंता है पर्यावरण की, इसका जो कारण है वो हमको देखना पड़ेगा, तभी हम इसके समाधान तक पहुंच पाएंगे. आदिकाल से जब भी विकास हुआ है, वन विभाग में सामान्यतः मैं आप लोगों को बता दूं कि जो कहा जाता है कि मानव सभ्यता का प्रथम आविष्कार, वहीं से पर्यावरण को क्षति शुरू हो गई. जो कि था अग्नि का आविष्कार। जहां फायर का इन्वेंशन हुआ, वहीं से फॉरेस्ट काटना, जंगल को कम करना, लैंड बनाना, बिल्डिंग्स बनाना शुरू हो गया। धीरे धीरे करते करते बहुत सारी चीजें तो कंट्रोल में रही, लेकिन जो हमारी 18वीं शताब्दी के बाद के चेंजेस हुए, खास करके वेस्टर्न थ्योरी जब आई, उसमें एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण बिंदु था। इनका जो वेस्टर्न थ्योरी यूटिलिटेरियन एटीट्यूड टू नेचर, जिसको अगर सामान्य भाषा में समझें तो ये कहा जा सकता है कि नेचर इज फॉर सर्विंग ह्यूमन बीइंग्स, यानी कि प्रकृति हमारे लिए है। यहां से बहुत सारी बुराइयां शुरू हुई, क्योंकि प्रकृति से हमारा संबंध क्या है, इसका निर्धारण करने में हमने नया रास्ता अपना लिया। आप सब लोगों को मैं एक बड़ा सरल स्लोगन बताऊंगा। हम लोग के यहाँ वन विभाग में एक बात लिखी जाती है, प्रकृति रक्षति रक्षिता, नेचर प्रोटेक्ट्स इफ सी। और हम लोग नेचर के प्रोटेक्शन के लिए क्या क्या करते हैं, व्यवहारिक रूप से बहुत सारी चीजें करने को शेष है जिनको हम लोग नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, लेकिन जो सैद्धांतिक रूप से कार्य किए जा रहे हैं वो भी कम नहीं है, और निश्चित रूप से उसमें बहुत सुधार हुआ है। जैसे प्रति वर्ष 22 अप्रैल को पृथ्वी दिवस का आयोजन अर्थ डे पूरे विश्व में मनाया जाता है। इसके साथ साथ पर्यावरण से जुड़े हुए और ढेर सारे आयोजन हम लोग करते हैं। अभी मैं आगे थोड़ा सा स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के जो कार्य है माननीय मुख्यमंत्री के निर्देशन में, उस पर मैं चर्चा करूंगा। लेकिन प्रश्न ये है कि जब हम कहते हैं कि अर्थ या पृथ्वी, तो आखिर पृथ्वी है क्या? क्या पृथ्वी एक मिट्टी का टुकड़ा है, या उसका कोई एक ऐसा रूप भी है जिसको हम एक आदर, सम्मान, श्रद्धा और सद्भावना से देखें? इसमें लिटरेचर में जो ढेर सारी चीजें हैं, उसके पहले हम लोग एक ऐसी सभ्यता में जाएंगे जहाँ पे चीजें अभी लिपि हम लोग पढ़ नहीं पाए। हड़प्पा सभ्यता है, सिंधु सभ्यता। लेकिन जिन लोगों ने इतिहास पढ़ा हो वो सब जानते होंगे कि हड़प्पा सभ्यता में प्रकृति पूजन, वृक्ष पूजन और पशु पूजन की भी व्यवस्था थी, जो कि उनकी लिपियों से स्पष्ट होता है। जब हम संस्कृत लिटरेचर की बात करते हैं, संस्कृत लिटरेचर दो पार्ट्स में डिवीजन हुई। एक को हम कहते हैं वैदिक संस्कृत, दूसरे कहते हैं लौकिक संस्कृत। वैदिक संस्कृत में जो हमारे साहित्य हैं, वेद और उनके साथ वेदांत, उनके सबके लेखक कोई नहीं हुए, ऋषियों ने उनका दर्शन किया। ऋषि शब्द का अर्थ ही है ऋषियों मंत्र प्रस्तारा। ऋषि वो है जिसने मंत्रों का दर्शन किया। कोई रचयिता नहीं है वेद मंत्र। एक जंगल में एक ऋषि ने साधना की, उसको कुछ ज्ञान प्राप्त हुआ, उसने अपने शिष्यों से कहा। इसी प्रक्रिया से हमारी श्रुति पूरा वैदिक साहित्य चला। वैदिक कालों ने प्रारंभ में जो प्राकृतिक लीलाएं देखी, उन लीलाओं को बड़ी सरलता से समझने के लिए उन्होंने भिन्न भिन्न प्रकृति के तत्वों को लेकर देवताओं की कल्पना की, और तीनों स्तर के देवताओं की कल्पना की। एक देवता उन्होंने जो सबसे अंतरिक्ष के ऊपर जाते हैं, द्विस्थानीय देवता, जिसमें वरुण, पूषण, मित्र, सवित्री, सूर्य, विष्णु, आश्विन, पूषा, इस सब के बारे में आप लोग जानते होंगे, प्रकृति की गतिविधियों के प्रतीक। इसी तरह अंतरिक्ष के देवता माने जाते हैं, इंद्र हैं, अपाम, मपान, पर्जन्य, आप, रुद्र, मरु। पृथ्वी स्थानीय देवता अग्नि, बृहस्पति, सोम माने जाते हैं। पृथ्वी का जो हम लोग एक रूप देख रहे हैं, इसका एक चिन्मय रूप भी है जो चैतन्य भाव से है, और उस चिन्मय रूप को मुझे नहीं पता कि आप लोग में से कितने लोग प्रातःकाल बिस्तर से जब जमीन पे पैर रखते हैं तो पृथ्वी की वंदना करते हैं। हमारे यहाँ शाश्वत रूप से, सनातन रूप से श्लोक पढ़ा जाता है, कराग्रे बसते लक्ष्मी, कर मध्य उसके बाद कहते हैं समुद्र बसने हुई पर्वत स्थल मंडली विष्णुपति नमस्ते पादस्पर्श। हे पृथ्वी माता, मैं अपना पैर तुम्हारे ऊपर रखने जा रहा हूँ, मुझे क्षमा कर। ये सद्भावना और ये पवित्र भावना जो पृथ्वी के प्रति हमारे यहाँ थी, वो बिल्कुल माता की भावना थी। और इस पृथ्वी माता को श्रीदेवी, भूदेवी, गौ, कामरूपा, पयस्वती, सुरभि, धेनु इत्यादि शब्दों से कहा गया है। एक बड़ा अच्छा सूक्त अथर्ववेद में आता है। अथर्ववेद के 12वें कांड का प्रथम सूक्त है, जिसको पृथ्वी सूक्त कहते हैं। पृथ्वी सूक्त में बिल्कुल माता और पुत्र का संबंध पृथ्वी से और हम लोगों से बताया गया। और उसमें माता क्या आपसे अपेक्षा करती है, पुत्र माता से क्या प्रार्थना करता है, ये सब बताया गया है। और उसमें अगर हम ध्यान से पढ़ते हैं, उसके अर्थ को समझते हैं, तो कई जगह आज की जो पर्यावरणीय समस्याएं उनका भी समाधान उसमें थे। जैसे यत्ते मध्यम पृथ्वी यच मध्यम यास्त ऊर्जस तन्व संभवु तासुनो थे यदि महस्व माता भूमि पुत्रो हम पृथिव्याः पर्जन्यः पिता सौनः पितरतु। यानी कि लैंड इज माय मदर, आई एम द सन ऑफ द लैंड। और जब पृथ्वी माता है तो हमारी सभी की माताओं की भी माता है। अब पृथ्वी माता है तो माता क्यों कहा गया है? ऋषि ने कहा कि माता के जितने गुण हैं, जितने कार्य हैं, वो सब पृथ्वी के हैं। जैसे माता बीज को धारण करती है, जीव को उत्पन्न करती है, उसका पुष्पन पल्लवन पोषण करती है, अपने बच्चे को प्रशिक्षित करती है और स्वतंत्र बनाने के बाद उसका साथ छोड़ती है या उसको बाहर छोड़ देती है। पृथ्वी का भी यही धर्म है कि जितना भी उससे जुड़ा हुआ हम लोगों का संसार है, प्रकृति पृथ्वी उसी तरह से हमारा पालन पोषण करती है। ऋषि जब भूमि का पूजन करता है तो वंदना करता है, विश्वस्तम मात्र औषधीनाम ध्रुवाम भूमि पृथ्वी धर्मादिताम शिवाम शिवना मुनिचलन विश्वहा। धर्म से धारण की हुई कल्याण स्वरूप और सुख स्वरूप पृथ्वी का हम लोग पूजन करते हैं। अब माता हमसे क्या अपेक्षा करती है? पृथ्वी पहले मंत्र में ऋषि कहते हैं सत्यम बृहदृतम उग्रम दीक्षा ततो ब्रह्म यज्ञ पृथ्वी धारयति सा नो भूतस्य भव्यस्य पत्नुरुं लोकम पृथ्वी न प्रणयतु। पृथ्वी को धारण करने की योग्यता किसमें है? पृथ्वी अर्थात प्रकृति का जो हमारा मुख्य है, जो हमारा जनक है, सारी वनस्पतियों का सबका जनक है, सबका आश्रय है, उसको धारण करने की योग्यता किसमें है ये बताया गया है। सत्य, बृहद, ऋत, उग्र, दीक्षा, तपस्या, ब्रह्म और यज्ञ, ये 8 तत्व जिसके अंदर हैं वही पृथ्वी को धारण कर सकता है। आजकल एक सामान्य सा प्रचलन है कि वीर भोग्या वसुंधरा भी कई बार हम लोग सुनते हैं, और धीरे धीरे पृथ्वी को भोग की वस्तु बना दिया गया। और कहीं न कहीं यही समस्या का कारण है, क्योंकि जब हम पृथ्वी को वंदनीय पूजनीय मानेंगे तो ये सारी समस्याएं खत्म हो जाएंगी। क्योंकि पृथ्वी के लिए आपको कठोर नियम उग्र तप आदि करने पड़ेंगे, त्याग की भावना रखनी पड़ेगी, और जो विकास की हम लोग बात करते हैं सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के लिए, उस सबको भी इससे मार्गदर्शन मिलेगा। ईशोपनिषद में स्पष्ट कहा गया है ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत् किंच जगत्याम जगत तेन त्यक्तेन भुंजीता मार्गधर कस्य सिद्धि। यानी कि जो कुछ है सब प्रकृति का है, ईश्वर का है, आप तो केवल उतना ही ग्रहण करिए जितनी आपकी जरूरत है और त्याग भाव से ग्रहण करिए। भागवत महापुराण में भी स्पष्ट कहा गया है यावत भेद दर्शन तावत स्वत्वम ही देगा अधिकम योग विमन्यत सस्तेनो दंडवत, कि आपकी जितनी जरूरत है उतने को ही आप ग्रहण कर सकते हैं। उससे अधिक अगर आप चाहते हैं तो आप चोर हैं और दंड के भागी। इसको अगर हम आज के परिप्रेक्ष्य में देखेंगे तो पाएंगे कि हम लोग इन सबसे बहुत दूर हो गए हैं, शायद इसीलिए सारी समस्याएं हुई। पृथ्वी का जो गुण है, नाना प्रकार की शक्तियों और औषधियों को धारण करती है। नाना वीर्या औषधीय विवर्ती। समुद्र, नदियां, जल, अन्न मनुष्यों की जननी है। प्राणियों का धारण और पोषण करती है। संपूर्ण विश्व को धारण करने वाली है। सुवर्ण आदि को अपने वक्षस्थल में रखती है। हिरण्य वक्षा कहा गया है इसको। वैश्वानरम विभ्रति, अग्नि को अपने अंदर धारण करती है। जन्म विभ्रति बहुधा विवाचसम, विविध के बोलने वाले। नाना धर्माणम पृथ्वी यथोपतम, नाना धर्मों के पालन करने वाले लोगों का पालन करके ध्यान रखती है। पृथ्वी सबको एक दृष्टि से देखती है। ऋषि उनसे प्रार्थना करता है कि मुझे इतनी शक्ति दीजिए कि मैं मीठा बोलूं। और शायद यही भावना हमको पृथ्वी को संरक्षण करने और पर्यावरण को बचाने के लिए जरूरी है। पुत्र के लिए क्या धर्म है, यानी हम सबका पृथ्वी और पर्यावरण के प्रति क्या धर्म है, उसको बड़े स्पष्ट रूप से ऋषि ने कहा है। यत्ते भूने दिखनाम क्षिप्रम तदक वो हतु माते मर्म विमित बड़ी माते हृदय मपार्पिकम, यानी कि तुम्हारे जो कंद मूल जल पत्थर बालू हम खोदते हैं वे पुनः शीघ्र उत्पन्न हो जाए। अर्थात पृथ्वी ये है कि आप हमारा उतना ही शोषण करो, उतना ही दोहन करो कि हमसे फिर वो चीजें पैदा हो जाए। और ये हम सब का धर्म है कि जब भी पृथ्वी से कुछ हम ग्रहण करें, चाहे माइनिंग करें, चाहे हम ट्री को कहीं इधर से उधर करें, पेड़ काटें, उस सबको जड़ नहीं खत्म करनी हमको, केवल अपने उपयोग के लिए ग्रहण करना। ये वैदिक ऋषि करता है। महाभारत में बड़ा साफ लिखा हुआ है, विदुर जी कहते हैं पुष्पम पुष्पम चिन्विता मूल क्षेत्र प्रकार है कि आप पुष्प को चुनो, फूल चुनिए आप, लेकिन आप अगर पेड़ ही काट के उखाड़ के फेंक देंगे तो ये अच्छी बात नहीं है। और यही हम सब लोगों का मुख्य उद्देश्य होना चाहिए। पृथ्वी के ऊपर जो ग्राम जंगल सभाएं युद्ध समितियां हैं, उन सब में हम पृथ्वी का दान करें। वैदिक ऋषि ये भी कहते हैं, जो आज हम लोग चर्चा कर रहे हैं। ये ग्रामाय दरणीयम या सभा अधिभूम्याम ये संग्रामा समितियां तेज चालू बदलते। पृथ्वी से हमारी पृथ्वी से पर्यावरण की बहुत उम्मीदें हैं। लौकिक साहित्य में अवभूति के उत्तर रामचरित में भगवान राम जब प्रश्रवण पर्वत पे जाते हैं तो वहां बड़ा स्पष्ट कहते हैं यत्र द्रुमाति मृगाति बांधवों में, ये वो जगह है जहाँ के वृक्ष और जहाँ के पशु पक्षी सब मेरे बंधु बांधव। हम लोग राम राज्य की कल्पना कर रहे हैं, राम राज्य की बात कर रहे हैं। इससे बड़ा पर्यावरण के लिए उपयोगी तो कोई हो नहीं सकता कि भगवान राम स्वयं द्रुमों को और पशु पक्षियों को अपने बांधव के रूप में कर रहे हैं। अभिज्ञान शाकुंतला में शकुंतला के वर्णन में कर्ण ऋषि कहते हैं वृक्षों से कि शकुंतला ऐसी है जो बिना तुमको पानी पिलाए पानी नहीं पीती। क्या हम लोगों में से ये सोच है कि हम पहले पौधों को जल दें, पशु पक्षियों को जल दें, उसके बाद स्वयं कुछ ग्रहण करें? ये साहित्य में विशिष्ट चर्चा है। क्लाइमेट चेंज पे काफ़ी चर्चा हो गई है, इसलिए मैं उस पर विशेष बात नहीं करूँगा। बस हम लोगों का प्रयास ये होना चाहिए कि जो कुछ भी क्लाइमेट चेंज के फैक्टर्स हैं उसको जानें, और जो मैन मेड है, तमाम तो नेचर मेड है, उसमें करने की बहुत गुंजाइश नहीं रहती है, लेकिन जो मैन मेड है उसमें अधिक से अधिक हम लोग प्रयास करें कि उसको क्लाइमेट चेंज को यथासंभव नियंत्रण रहे। उत्तर प्रदेश में पिछले दिनों कई वर्षों से जब से माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी ने वृक्षारोपण के लिए विशेष निर्देश दिए हैं, प्रतिवर्ष बड़ी मात्रा में पेड़ लगाए जा रहे हैं। वृक्षारोपण एक महाअभियान के रूप में चल रहा है, लेकिन यह भी एक चिंता का विषय है कि अभी हमारे प्रदेश में वन क्षेत्र 6.15% ही है केवल, और अगर हम सामाजिक वानिकी के 3.08 को मिला लें तो कुल 9.23% हमारा वन क्षेत्र होता है। उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार ने एक लक्ष्य रखा हुआ है कि 2027 तक हम वनारोपण क्षेत्र जो है 27% के आसपास ले जाएंगे। मैं आप लोग को बता दूं कि उत्तर प्रदेश में जनसंख्या का घनत्व बहुत ज़्यादा है, इसलिए जो हमारे राष्ट्र का मानक है या विश्व का मानक है उसको प्राप्त करने में ढेर सारी समस्याएं रहती हैं। फिर भी हम लोग का प्रयास है कि अधिक से अधिक वृक्षारोपण किया जाए और जो भी हमारी वजह से ग्रीन गैस का उत्सर्जन और प्रकृति को नुकसान करने वाली चीजें हैं उनको कंट्रोल किया जाए। जो हमारा एनर्जी सेक्टर, इंडस्ट्री सेक्टर, ट्रांसपोर्ट सेक्टर, बिल्डिंग सेक्टर, एग्रीकल्चर और लैंड यूज सेक्टर है जिसके कारण ढेर सारे चेंजेस हो रहे हैं, उसमें पॉलिसी बनाकर सरकार द्वारा काफ़ी प्रयास किया जा रहा है कि हम लोग क्लाइमेट चेंज को ऐसा करें कि जो हमारे आपके लिए सबके लिए अनुकूल हो और अगली पीढ़ी को एक अच्छा समाज, एक अच्छा पर्यावरण, एक ऐसी प्रकृति हम लोग देकर जाएं जैसा हमें अपने पूर्वजों से मिला। मैं आप सब लोगों से अनुरोध करूंगा कि कम से कम हम लोग वृक्षारोपण अवश्य करें। इस वर्ष एक अभियान चल रहा है, एक पेड़ मां के नाम, तो आप सब लोग वृक्षारोपण विशेष रुचि रखें। कम से कम एक पेड़ अपनी माँ के लिए लगाएं, अपनी प्रकृति माँ के लिए लगाएं, अपने आसपास कोई नदी बहती हो तो नदी माँ के लिए लगाएं और पर्यावरण को संरक्षित करने के लिए अपना सहयोग प्रदान करें। मैं अंत में प्रोफेसर अजय शुक्ला जी को, उनकी टीम को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद दूंगा कि उन्होंने बुलाया मुझे, अपने विचार रखने का मौका दिया। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Professor Yogesh Sinha is there on the screen. He has to leave now. He was listening to Dr. Tripaঠি's lecture. He has sent me the message also, and the message is please convey this to him. I enjoyed listening to him, and I just want to quote his words. It is, thank you Tripathi ji for talking about the principles rooted in our scriptures that inspire reverence for nature and how they advocate sustainable living practices that align with ecological balance and environmental stewardship. So this is the message actually which was sent by Professor Yogesh Sinha.
Thank you everyone, and now I thank you Satyam ji, you are going to speak now. Thank you so much for everything. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor Ajay Shukla sir to deliver his address. It's my honor.
Very good evening to all of you. First of all, I must congratulate that on the 75th year of excellence of Deen Dayal Upadhyay University, it could have none been a better occasion organizing an international conference, and that too by the Department of English under the headship of Professor Dr. Ajay Shukla. So I would like to request the audience for a thundering round of applause. I would be failing in my duty. Honorable Vice Chancellor of Deen Dayal Upadhyay University, Professor Dr. Nandanji, dignitaries on the dais, Professor Shantanu Rastogi ji, the chairperson. We have Professor Dr. Chandra Bhushan Tripathi ji, the guest of honor. We have the chief guest, Professor Dr. Yogesh Sinha ji, Professor Shantanu Rastogi ji, the chairperson, Professor Anup Kumar, the co-convener, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Vishkarma ji, the moderator, and if I am failing anybody on the dais, please excuse me. And there are dignitaries who are sitting in the audience, my dear students and friends. It is a matter of great honor for me to be standing out here. I saw Gorakhpur in 1986 and I saw Gorakhpur through the eyes of Ritesh Kumar Sharma and Abhineshwar Goswami. I hope if they are sitting out here, they can. It has been a drastic change. And I must congratulate Professor Dr. Ajay Shukla. I am doing all these congratulations in the beginning because after I speak and when I am going to conclude, I may forget all these things. So that duty I am just finishing it right in the beginning because I am going to take you through a different journey of the topic which has been initiated by the Department of English. And believe me, trust me, in the 35 years of my experience, I have never come across a topic which says environmental and apocalyptic imagination, eco-critical readings in South Asian literature. And the credit I know goes to Professor Dr. Ajay Shukla, who is the convener of the conference, and to his entire team. I know the amount of hard work it takes in organizing a 2 days conference, a lot of hard work. He phoned me 2.5 months before. He said, I would like to invite you. I said, it's a very difficult job because I am working in a private university and by virtue of being the senior most professor in Amity University, they have given me the additional job of the chief proctor as well as the head of the examination committee. So you can very well imagine how difficult it is to extract some extra time and come all the way, but it was the love and affection. I had met Professor Ajay Shukla in 1990 when he was just Ajay Shukla. And now you can see the difference. He's sitting out there, and I must tell you, he's actually a symbol of hard work, firm determination, perseverance, and indomitable will. So you must. Now, if I come to the topic, my friend Professor Dr. Yogesh Sinha has discussed so many things. I'm not going to go into the details of it. I hope everybody is able to hear me. That is, you see, you have to be a good listener in life. There are three very important things, whether you are a student of English, or whether you are a student of technology, or management, or architecture, or fine arts, etc. You must be a voracious reader, you must be an excellent writer, and you must be a charismatic speaker. Irrespective of anything. Now there are three very important things in the topic. You find whether it is South Asian literature, whether it is British literature, whether it is romantic literature, whether it is American literature, you find all these literatures, they have come from the dictum of action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction. I hope you have heard about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. What Socrates said, Plato reacted. And what Plato said, Aristotle reacted. And you can imagine these three people, I have never come across a teacher-student relationship that they had. Socrates was the teacher of Plato, and Plato was the teacher of Aristotle, and Aristotle was the teacher of the Alexander the Great. So you can imagine, Plato banished all the poets from the school of poetry. And Aristotle said, my teacher, I agree to disagree. why have you banished all the poets from the school of poetry? Aristotle said, I agree. And Plato said, because poets are all imitators. And if imitation of an imitation is being done, this means poetry is being twice removed from reality. So where is the reality? And then you can imagine a student like Aristotle, he says, sir, I agree, but I disagree. I agree that all art is imitation, but if that imitation is mixed with the imagination, with the imaginative creation of the writer, then that imitation is not imitation, that becomes a new creation of that writer. So, literature, as I was telling you, South Asian literature, if you look at it, I'm not going to go into the details of it. You know so many names. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak is there, Elaine Showalter is there, feminism is there, you find reader response theories are there, you find the entire facet of South Asian literature. You can call it the literature of the Indian subcontinent, you can call it the literature of Pakistan or India or Bangladesh or Nepal, but believe me, trust me, the entire facet of South Asian literature is based on crisis of identity, crisis of the sense of belonging, crisis, frustration, depression, dejection, suffering, sorrows, and the afflictions of life. You pick up any novel, you find all these things are present. Now it depends on the reader. You find Elizabethan literature, in reaction you had Jacobean literature, in reaction you had metaphysical, you had the Restoration literature, you had the classical literature, again in reaction you had the romantic literature, in reaction came the Victorian literature, in reaction came the Georgian literature, the modern literature, the postmodern literature, the colonial literature, the post-colonial literature, and whatnot. But if you go into the history of it, you find it is all dealing with the frustration, because literature of South Asia is, if a Westerner reading of the East is there, you call it Orientalism, and if an Easterner reading is of the Western, then you call Occidentalism. What is this action-reaction? So my humble request is that whatever literature you are reading, whether it is Indian literature, try to relate it to life. If you cannot relate literature to life, literature is useless. I give you example, you should be a good reader in life. Now reading does not mean that you read a novel or a poem or a newspaper. Reading is a very multifaceted word. You can read the eyes of a person. You find a person like Wordsworth, he was walking by the sides of river, and there were 999 people, you can call empty number of people, they were walking by the sides of the river. For all of them, flowers were ordinary flowers. But for a man whom you call William Wordsworth, he says, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over waves and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So, everyone was reading it. Eco-critical reading means how you can relate to life. Whether it is environmental reading, whether it is eco-critical reading, whether it is sentimental reading, the most important thing in life is that you must be a good reader in life. I am not talking about those deliberations which you are actually listening from yesterday. Many online presentations, offline presentations, but I am just trying to tell you my spontaneous overflow of whatever I have collected in the last 35 years. So you must be a good reader in life. A person who was crossing the woods and he stopped, he was sitting on the horse. He said, whose woods are these? I think I know. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up this snow. Now eyes, reader, and through those eyes, by the environment which he he is enjoying the beauty and the attraction and the fascination and the magnificence of the forest, he concludes and says, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So you must be a good leader in it. You are all students, you may be students of literature, but at the end of the day, you must be a good reader in life. If you are a good reader, you can change the environment. If you are a good reader, you can change the apocalyptic imagination. Apocalyptic imagination is nothing else, it is an adjective, apocalyptic. It can be an imagination of hope and despair. It can be a primary imagination of hope and despair. It can be a secondary imagination of hope and despair, what Samuel Taylor Coleridge says, willing suspension of disbelief. So what happens is, you should be, again and again I am emphasizing, what is important in life is any literature, whether it is South Asian, whether it is British, or Latin, or French, or German, or Arabic, or Urdu, it depends on read. For many it was a flower, for one it became fabulous. You must have heard about solitary reaper, solitary reaper. Solitary reaper, he says, whatever the theme the maiden sang. The girl who is harvesting the crop is a French girl. The poet is a Britisher. He does not understand the theme of the song. He says, whatever the theme the maiden sang, I listened motionless and still, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. So you can imagine that he doesn't know the theme, he doesn't know the idea and thoughts of the song, but then through the harmony and melody, he says, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. You cannot choose, you see, you have to be very clear in your perceptions. And literature, as I keep on telling you, it can be any literature. It can be Amitabh Ghosh, it can be Kamla Markande, it can be Arundhati Roy, it can be Mahashweta Devi. You take any, but then it depends on the reader how that literature is going to be shaped. The writer does his work, but it is the reader who takes the text to the destination. There was road not taken. You cannot do two things at the same time. I shall be telling you with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged, I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. You can do your PhD on South Asian literature, British literature, American literature, but you have to choose your own course. So, remember, any eco-critical reading related to the environment, imagination, you can relate it to apocalypticism, but at the end of the day, what happens is, you have to have. Now, one thing I just want to emphasize, you see in South Asian literature, there is a word called feminism. I hope everybody has heard about it. Now there are various interpretations. Now one thing is very clear, in literature, no answer is perfect. Believe me, no answer is perfect. All answers are approximately correct, provided if you have the art of convincing. There is a question exam which says, who is the hero of Macbeth? The question is, who is the hero of Macbeth? How many of you have read Macbeth? Can you raise your hand? Very good. Somebody will say, Macbeth is the hero of Macbeth. Somebody will say, Lady Macbeth is the hero of Macbeth. Somebody will say, Duncan is the hero of Macbeth. Others will say, nahi, Macbeth is the hero of Macbeth. Some other person is going to come and say the supernatural witches are the hero of Macbeth. And there is another person who is going to say, none of these are the hero of Macbeth. The style of William Shakespeare is the real hero of Macbeth. So you should have the ability, whether it is a literature of hope and despair, there are some great works which have been done in frustration and depression. You must have heard the name of John Milton. He was a poet. He was simply a poet and suddenly he became blind. And he wrote a sonnet called On His Blindness. And the first 8 lines he is complaining to God, God, this is the gift you have given me. I was writing pure poetry, I was writing spiritual poetry, and this is the gift which you have given me. And then in the next 6 lines he says, God, no problem. They also serve who stand and wait. And Milton became great after being blind. He wrote not only a poem, he wrote epic, that is Paradise Lost and Paradise Gained. So he is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He is telling to God, Paradise Lost. And it's a beautiful fight between heaven and hell. It's very difficult to read all the 12 books, but then through the eyes of reading, you can just relate all these things to life. So my humble submission is, now one thing I must tell you, whatever you should read, you should try to connect it through life. Feminism, I must tell you, feminism would have not been there today had people like Plato and Socrates and Alexander Pope had not made statements against women. Plato said, I am thankful to God that I am not born a slave and I am not born a woman. Plato. Then his student Aristotle says, the male by nature is superior and female by nature is inferior. One rules and the other is to be ruled. Then comes Sophocles. He says silence is the perfect grace to a woman. Then comes Shakespeare. He says frailty thy name is woman. Then you find comes Alexander Pope. He said most women have no character at all. Then comes the poet. He says women literature cannot be a cup of tea for women. And then comes Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now these are big names. These are not ordinary people. Feminism has started from Plato. Feminism has started from Aristotle. And slowly, gradually, you find it has come now that women are overpowering men in literature. But the credit does not go to Mary Wollstonecraft. The credit does not go to Elaine Showalter. The credit goes to Plato and Aristotle and Sophocles and Alexander. And I must tell you, had these people been alive today, they would have been burned alive by the women writers. But if the women writers are today, the credit goes to them. They have made such statements, such derogatory statements, and you can imagine. Ralph Waldo Emerson is saying that Jane Austen's novels, they are actually vulgar in tone. They are sterile in artistic invention. And there is a person of Mark Twain. He says that why Jane Austen has been allowed a natural death, she should have been burnt alive. So look at the perception. Look at the perception of these people who are actually commenting on females at that time, and that is the result that feminism, what is today, the credit goes to these people. Had they not commented like this, believe me, trust me, feminist writers would have not been. People like Elaine Showalter, people like Gayatri Chakrabarti, you must have read Can the Subaltern Speak? She writes there, the subaltern in many places in the subcontinent or throughout the world they cannot speak. Even today. So, I think I have taken time. So, you see, part my presentation. You just listen to me, and if you are a good listener, whatever I am telling you, everything will be eternal, immortal, and universal. But if you are a bad listener, then nothing will be eternal, immortal, and universal. So my humble request to you is that if you are students of literature, be it any literature, you just eyes of reading should be changed. And if you are a student of literature, You are free to write anything, provided you should have the art of convincing. Those flowers, daffodils, was made by verse. The forest, Robert Frost made, I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. You find Alexander Pope, he has written Break of the Lock, many of you must have read it. You find it in one of the cantos, I am forgetting the cantos, he says, this to disclose all thy guardians can, beware of all, but most beware of man. Now look at the irony of life. Who is Alexander Pope? He is a human being. On whom he is commenting, human being. He says, be careful of everything in life, but you should be extra careful when you are talking to a human being. And this is true. What he said in the neoclassical age is true in all the ages. This to disclose all thy guardians can, beware of all, but most beware of man. Now, in the end, I know it has been a hectic day for all of you, and I would just like to conclude that let nature be your teacher. Let nature be your teacher. One impulse from a world may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good than all the sages can. And once again, I would congratulate the English department and the convener of the conference, Professor Dr. Ajay Shukla, and his whole organizing team for inviting me. And believe me, trust me, the moment I arrived on the station of Gorakhpur and I was standing in front of you, it has been a mesmerizing experience for me. And talking to you all is something which I am going to relish and cherish throughout my life. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very extensive talk on the epistemologies and hermeneutics of ecological sublime and ecological efficiency of Western literature. Next in line, I would like to request the co-convener of this conference, Professor Alok Kumar, to come in and present the report of the conference. Professor Alok Kumar.
Good afternoon, all of you. Before I begin, let me inform you that for once today, I have been stripped off, I have been divested of my usual task of Thanksgiving. And I am here to present the report. Now, if you are divested of your portfolio by the head of the department, then you can do pretty little. You have to agree to that. So he insisted that he would be doing the thanks vote. Anyway, since Dr. Tripathi has set the note and language should be no barrier, we in the last 2 days, apart from the proceedings of the conference, the lectures, we gathered here to make a promise to ourselves, and in fact we did make a promise to ourselves. हमने एक अहद किया, एक वादा किया कि हम लोग जब यहाँ से निकलेंगे तो जो कुछ यहाँ बोला है हमने
जो बाहर दस्तखत किए हैं दीवार पे, वो अपनी जिंदगी में उतारेंगे। इस वादे को जीने की प्रॉमिस के साथ हम यहाँ से जाएंगे। वादे की बात आई है, मैं रिपोर्ट अभी तुरंत ज्यादा देर आपका नहीं पढ़ा और तो वादे आ गया। इट्स एन एकेडमिक कम्युनिटी एंड होप, जो मैं कह रहा हूँ 4 लाइन वो इस पे फिट ना बैठे, ऐसा हो कि वो गलत हो जाए कि ये बस्ती जानी पहचानी बहुत है, ये बस्ती जानी पहचानी बहुत है, यहाँ वादों की अर्जानी बहुत है। श्रोता लफ्ज लिखे जा रहे हैं मगर लहजों में वीरानी बहुत। ईश्वर करे जो हम लोगों ने कहा है, जो बातें की हैं, हम उस पर कायम रहें और आगे यहाँ से बाहर प्रकृति पे और धरती के साथ हमारा जो रिश्ता है वो बना रहता है। Now coming to my duty, okay. Now for that, before I sort of move on to the other details, of course, as far as this session is concerned, प्रत्यक्ष को प्रमाण क्या, आप सब लोगों ने इतना बढ़िया सुना और आप इतने बढ़िया गवाह हो सकते हैं उसके। मैं शायद ही उसके बारे में आपको बताऊं, उसके बारे में क्या बताऊं, ये सेकंड हैंड क्या बताना, आप सब लोगों ने महसूस किया इसे, ठीक है। तो अभी के बारे में हाँ, अपने मेहमानों के लिए जो कुछ हो चुका है वो जरूर बता देता हूँ। Let me first congratulate you for making this conference a truly successful. हाँ प्लीज।
बहुत अच्छा पढ़ाते होंगे, बच्चे बहुत खुश रहते होंगे।
Truly successful and enriching experience. ये चूंकि फॉर्मल रिपोर्ट है इसलिए मैं इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा इधर-उधर नहीं होना है और डाइग्रेशंस नहीं चाहता हूँ किस वजह से। It is an overwhelming feeling to share with you all that we received more than 250 abstract submissions and registrations from all over India. Okay. Now, the session yesterday began with the keynote address by Professor Ajay Shukla from Punjab University, Department of English and Cultural Studies, and he in his deliberations talked about the falling away from our duties, okay, in this universe, on this planet, okay, and the major theme that he picked up was the theme of othering. How the humans have chosen to other the other species, okay. How they have been segregated, okay. How they have been put outside, okay, our ken of concerns, and how we consider them just as instruments for our happiness or for our prosperity. Okay. Now, so that was his concern. And he raised many contemporary current issues of planetarity and all that. It was a very enriching lecture and we all enjoyed that. Then the second lecture was by Professor Nishi Pandey from Lucknow University. Now that lecture basically concerned itself as the lecture of Dr. Pandey today with the scriptures and how our scriptures have been very cognizant of these concerns, okay, our relations with nature, and of course, Professor Ajay Shukla talked about relationality between man and nature and all forms of life on earth, and similarly, Professor Nishi Pandey also. Of course, their trajectories, as it was pointed out yesterday, were different. But then, of course, these trajectories have to be brought, if there has to be some kind of action, some kind of palpable action, then there has to be some kind of consensus as well. Just by diverging in different directions, we cannot believe that we can have any kind of proper action. Now, so these two lectures, the first session, the paper reading sessions, they were spread over 30 sessions chaired by the members of our department. Not only the members of our department, but different departments, they contributed in the way that heads of the departments of Chhapra University, then Professor Madhu Kumar from Muzaffarpur University, and other professors from Itanagar. Now they chaired our technical sessions, and they were very enriching sessions, in fact, online sessions as well. All the participants, they presented papers, and I just can't point out to one particular area which was left out. All the major writers, minor writers, poems, drama, every genre was represented in the papers, the technical sessions that we had. Today and yesterday, once again, we had a lecture by Dr. Prasenjit Panda. And even in that lecture, he talked about the same concerns, and all of them emphasized the fact that, well, lecturing is fine, talking is fine, but what concrete action are we going to take? What are the actionable contents of our lectures? Now that was the basic crux of all their talks. Now after that, today morning, we had another plenary session by Professor Ajay Shukla, where he elaborated on the themes that he had taught as the keynote speaker. Of course, as the keynote speaker, you don't have the time on the stage to develop your arguments in great detail, and he quoted from texts and made it more available to us in many ways. Then there were technical sessions even today, around 6 to 7 technical sessions. In all, of course, I said 13, 14 sessions, and where again the participants presented their papers. That it was a very enriching experience. Okay, the report doesn't have to be evaluative, it just has to be informative. So I won't go into that. I'll leave that for my head of the department. And now I invite him. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this beautiful summary of the whole conference. Now I would like to invite Dr. Devin Tiwari to present, just give a feedback of this seminar, whole conference. Dr. Devin Tiwari.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me this opportunity to share the feedback of this 2 days international conference. Beginning from the first day to this valedictory session, every aspect of the theme of this conference was focused, elaborated, and no stone was left unturned by the stalwart speakers, be it our keynote speaker, be it our experts from the Department of English, and various participants from all over the world. I must say, Professor Sinha deliberated his ideas sitting in US, and very effectively he highlighted